Have you ever had one of those moments where, like, you're just going about your day and then, boom, something clicks and suddenly a bunch of things that seem totally random start to make sense?
Yeah, like those aha moments.
Exactly, like those aha moments. And I think that's what we're going to be diving into today.
I think so too.
So we're looking at some recent perspectives from Krzysztof Jackowski, the clairvoyant.
Yeah.
And, he covers some really fascinating topics.
Oh, yeah, he always does.
This time around, we're going to be talking about pyramids.
Okay.
Current geopolitical stuff, like some big players, Trump, Putin, Netanyahu.
All right.
And we're going to look at Poland in 2028.
Interesting.
And even a really personal story he tells.
Wow. It's so all over the place.
Yeah, kind of all over the place. But our mission is, for you listening, is to see if we can pull these threads together,
Yeah.
explore the why behind it all, and hopefully trigger a few of those aha moments for you.
Yeah, for sure. And the source material that we're working with today is a transcript from Mr. Jackowski's YouTube channel. It's a video called Nomads Who Are Afraid of the Sun Live Vision.
Okay.
So it's a fascinating blend of observations and predictions. And as always, our aim here is not to say whether any of this is right or wrong,
Right.
but to really understand what's being presented
Yeah.
and what potential insights we can draw from it for you, the listener.
Right. I mean, who knows what the future holds, right?
Exactly.
So we'll be focusing on his thoughts about pyramids and who built them.
Okay.
His take on the current geopolitical scene with Trump, Putin, Netanyahu, particularly the possibility of an attack on Iran.
Right.
And we'll take a look at his outlook for Poland in 2028.
Got it.
And then that very compelling personal story.
Sounds good. I'm ready to jump in.
Okay, let's start with something truly ancient and mysterious.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
The pyramids.
Ooh, yeah, classic.
So apparently Jackowski wasn't actually planning on even going there, but a question from an artist friend about the pyramids like over 3 decades ago
Wow.
sparked a really persistent vision.
A vision about pyramids from 30 years ago.
Yeah, and it stayed consistent for all this time, which is pretty wild.
That is really wild. What did he see?
Well, according to the transcript, he saw these beings that were much taller than the average ancient Egyptians.
Okay.
Like, he estimated them to be around 2.3 to 2.50 meters tall.
Whoa, that's huge.
Yeah, so that's like over 7.5 to over 8 feet tall.
That's significantly taller than the average person.
Right, and these beings were always dressed in black, and their heads were covered in a way that hid their faces completely.
Okay, so mysterious figures.
Yeah, very mysterious, and maybe the most striking detail is that they were mostly active at night
Oh, interesting.
and seemed to be avoiding sunlight.
Why would they avoid sunlight?
Well, he perceived it as deadly to them.
Deadly. Wow.
Yeah, so for these beings, night was like their daytime.
That is so interesting. Are there any theories as to why they were avoiding sunlight?
Well, that's where it gets really interesting, and maybe this will grab your attention.
I'm all ears.
He connects this decades-old vision to something more recent. Some reports about unusual structures that were found beneath the Pyramid of Khafre. Yeah, you might know it as Khafre.
Oh, yeah. Okay, I've heard of that.
They found these structures using radio wave techniques.
Like some kind of scanning technology.
Yeah, exactly. So it's kind of like using advanced scanning to see what's underground without actually having to dig.
Oh, wow, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, you might have even heard something about this because there were reports in 2022 and even earlier in 2017 suggesting they might have found large chambers or empty spaces.
I think I vaguely remember hearing something about that.
Yeah, it was big news for a while, but we have to remember the scientific community is very divided on all this.
Oh, really? Divided? How so?
Well, a lot of experts are skeptical.
I see.
So it's really important to note that while these radio wave studies hint at the possibility of something massive being under there,
Right.
no major archaeological organizations have actually confirmed these findings.
So it's still a big question mark.
Pretty much, yeah.
So how does this all tie back into Jackowski's vision?
Well, it seems like he has a feeling that the pyramids, or at least some of them, might have actually functioned as generators.
Generators. What do you mean by that?
Well, he thinks they were important pieces of technology for these beings who avoided the sun,
I see.
and maybe it was like a way for them to connect or communicate when other ways weren't possible.
Interesting.
It's really interesting because he specifically says he doesn't sense any vast network of structures underground beneath the pyramids.
So not like a huge hidden city or anything?
No, not really, which actually kind of lines up with some of the skepticism in the scientific community about there being extensive hidden chambers.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, so he's making a distinction between the pyramid structures that we see and what might be far below them.
Right.
And his intuition points more towards the pyramids themselves having a specific function.
Okay, so the pyramids as some kind of technology, that's a really fascinating takeaway.
Right. And he also brings up another idea.
What's that?
He suggests that maybe the pyramids acted as energy collectors.
Energy collector.
Yeah, and they might have produced a very subtle kind of energy pulse.
Huh. So we're talking about ancient Egyptian pyramids potentially being like some sort of advanced tech.
Yeah, it's a real shift in perspective.
That's pretty mind-blowing.
Right, because we usually just think of them as tombs.
Yeah, like giant, elaborate tombs.
Right, but what if there was something more?
That's a great question.
So then that makes us wonder, who were these beings and why were they even here on Earth so afraid of sunlight?
Yeah, like where did they come from?
Jackowski suggests that maybe they came here because of some problem they had somewhere else.
Oh, so they were seeking refuge.
Yeah, exactly. Even if Earth's conditions, especially the sun, were uncomfortable or even harmful to them.
So they might have been vulnerable in some way, even though they built these incredible structures.
Yeah, it's a really interesting concept to think about.
And it makes you wonder what kind of environments they might have come from if sunlight was so deadly to them.
Now get ready for a connection that might surprise you.
Okay, lay it on me.
Jackowski brings up the Old Testament.
The Old Testament.
Yeah, and specifically the stories about fallen angels.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And you know how some interpretations say that these fallen angels lived among humans?
Uh-huh.
He makes a parallel between these ancient stories and the potential timeline of the pyramids.
So he's saying these beings could be like the fallen angels from the Bible.
Well, he doesn't say it outright,
Right.
but he's definitely making you think about it.
I see.
It's a link that makes you reconsider those old stories in a new light.
Definitely. And the timeline is interesting, too, because the Old Testament predates the time of Jesus by quite a bit.
Right.
So potentially those events were happening around the same time the pyramids were being built.
It's all very thought-provoking, for sure.
It really is.
And he also mentions pyramids in other parts of the world.
Oh, right, like South America?
Exactly. He's suggesting that maybe this was a global thing connected to these beings, or at least their influence.
So not just an Egyptian phenomenon, but maybe a worldwide one.
Right. It's a fascinating idea.
It is.
Now, to wrap up his thoughts on the pyramids, Jackowski seems to feel that all the media hype around those recent discoveries might be a little exaggerated.
Okay.
And he reminds us that even if humans built the pyramids,
Yeah.
we still don't really understand their motivations or the true purpose of these structures.
So we're still in the dark in a lot of ways.
Pretty much.
So when we step back and look at this whole segment, what really stands out is how Jackowski is combining this personal vision he had decades ago with current scientific discussions. Even if those discussions are still in the early stages, and he's not afraid to challenge the traditional explanations.
Yeah.
And he's inviting us to consider possibilities that go beyond the typical narrative while still being aware of the need for skepticism.
It's a good reminder for all of us to be open-minded but critical.
Exactly.
Okay, let's switch gears now and look at the global stage through Jackowski's lens.
Okay, I'm ready.
And we're going to be focusing on Trump, Putin, Netanyahu, and the possibility of an attack on Iran.
This is some heavy stuff.
It is, and it's pretty detailed, and given what's happening in the world right now, it could be very relevant.
Yeah, no kidding.
He starts by talking about Israel and the Middle East, and he predicts a complete pacification of the region by Israel.
Pacification.
Yeah, and he says civilians will be targeted.
Oh, wow.
And he doesn't think this will get much attention in mainstream media.
So kind of swept under the rug.
Yeah, that's the idea.
That's disturbing.
Yeah, it's a very unsettling prediction.
It is.
He also foresees 2 major attacks on Yemen, which will be framed as targeting terrorists.
Okay.
And then following that, an attack on Iran, possibly around July.
So a series of escalating attacks.
That's what he's seeing.
What happens after that?
Well, he describes a scenario where Iran retaliates.
Makes sense they would want to defend themselves.
Of course, and that triggers a powerful counterattack by Israel,
Oh, wow.
which leads to them occupying at least half of Syria.
Occupying half of Syria, that's a major escalation.
It is, and according to his vision, international organizations are going to call for restraint.
Okay.
But Israel will threaten to use nuclear weapons if Iran retaliates again.
So the stakes are incredibly high.
Yeah, he's painting a picture of rapid escalation and really dangerous tensions in the Middle East.
It sounds like a powder keg ready to explode.
Yeah, and he says Iran will be significantly weakened after that first attack,
Oh, wow.
and their leaders will be afraid of further escalation.
So they'll be stuck between a rock and a hard place.
Pretty much. But interestingly, he predicts a period of relative quiet after all these events.
Oh, really? A calm after the storm?
That's what he's suggesting.
It's a very specific and honestly very concerning sequence of events.
Yeah, it's definitely something to keep in mind.
For sure.
Okay, so now he shifts his focus to Putin and Trump. And this is where it gets complicated.
Oh boy, here we go.
He states very clearly that Putin is not Trump's friend.
Okay.
And he says that Putin has something significant that he's had for a long time, going back decades.
Uh-huh.
And this something gives him a lot of influence over Trump.
Okay, so some kind of leverage or control.
Yeah, that's the idea.
Do we know what this leverage is?
He doesn't say exactly, but he uses this term injunction.
Injunction.
Yeah, and he's talking about Putin's aims for Ukraine via Trump.
So Putin is using this injunction to get Trump to do things that benefit Russia's interests in Ukraine.
That's the implication, and it's not a term we usually hear in this context.
No, it's not.
But it seems like he's talking about some kind of serious control that Putin has over Trump.
I wonder what that could be.
Yeah, it's a big mystery, but it's definitely a key takeaway from this part of the transcript.
Definitely.
And then he connects this idea of colonialism to Trump.
Colonialism.
Yeah, he's suggesting that maybe Trump's actions are driven by these external pressures as much as by American interests.
So his actions might not be entirely his own?
That's what Jackowski seems to be saying.
That's a pretty big claim.
It is, and it's a fascinating thing to think about.
It makes you wonder how interconnected the agendas of these major global players really are.
Exactly. And how much is happening behind the scenes that we're not aware of.
For sure.
And he even brings up some of Trump's past statements and actions.
Well, like what?
Well, things like his interest in acquiring Canada and Greenland.
I remember that.
And the trade wars he started.
Right.
He's suggesting that maybe these weren't just Trump being Trump, but maybe they were influenced by these external factors.
So maybe he was acting on behalf of someone else's agenda.
That's the implication.
And a really interesting perspective.
It is, and it makes you question everything you thought you knew about how things work on the global stage.
Right, because we often assume that leaders are acting solely in the best interests of their own countries.
Right.
But what if there are these hidden dynamics at play that are influencing their decisions?
Yeah, it's a really important question to consider.
It is.
And then Jackowski makes a prediction about betrayal.
Well, betrayal, who betrays who?
He says that Putin will ultimately betray Trump and that Russia will betray Trump.
Wow, so he doesn't see their relationship lasting.
No, he doesn't. It sounds like he thinks it's built on shifting sands rather than genuine alliance.
It makes you wonder what Putin's endgame is.
Yeah, it does. And it's especially concerning because Jackowski expresses a very strong feeling that a dangerous period is coming for Trump.
Dangerous in what way?
He suggests that there might be some kind of internal decision within the U.S. about him.
Oh, wow. So something big is coming.
That's what it sounds like, and he outlines some serious potential consequences for Europe if something were to happen to Trump.
Like what kind of consequences?
Well, he thinks that Trump's influence is currently holding Ukraine to Putin's peace terms, even though those terms are probably not very favorable. And he thinks if Trump's influence were to be removed, Zelensky and Ukraine wouldn't abide by those terms anymore.
So that would lead to further conflict.
Exactly, and it could potentially escalate into a much bigger conflict in Europe.
And Putin would likely respond.
Yeah, he would feel compelled to respond.
So the removal of Trump could be a really destabilizing factor in this whole situation?
Yeah, Jackowski sees it as a major turning point.
It's scary to think about.
It is.
So in this scenario, Putin's power is mainly through Trump. And if that leverage goes away, the already fragile balance could collapse.
Exactly, and Jackowski thinks that balance is already tilted in Putin's favor.
So things could get a lot worse.
Yeah, that's what he's suggesting. And he even mentions a possible agreement about the Black Sea.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it sounds like there's been some delicate progress, but it all hinges on this complicated relationship between Putin and Trump.
So if that relationship falls apart, everything could fall apart.
Pretty much.
This is a lot to take in.
It is.
It's like a house of cards.
Yeah, that's a good analogy.
One wrong move and the whole thing comes crashing down.
Exactly.
And you mentioned that Jackowski hinted at the source of the threat to Trump.
Oh, yeah. He has this feeling that federal services, which he interprets as U.S. special services,
Okay.
either have evidence or strongly suspect some kind of wrongdoing.
On Trump's part.
Yeah, or maybe some kind of undue influence regarding his actions or loyalties.
So maybe they think he's not acting in the best interests of the United States.
Right, and that adds a whole other layer to these geopolitical predictions.
Yeah, it's a whole domestic political angle that we have to consider.
Definitely complicates things.
For sure.
Okay, let's move on to a topic that I'm sure is of interest to a lot of our listeners, especially those in Europe.
Okay, what's that?
The future of Poland in 2028.
Oh, wow. 2028, that's not that far off.
I know, right? And the transcript mentions a question about whether Poland will even exist by then.
Really?
Yeah, but Jackowski dismisses that as complete nonsense.
Okay, so he's not buying into that theory.
No, he's not, and he's very firm about it.
Good to know.
Yeah, he says there's been this narrative of fear circulating in Poland for a while.
Fear about what?
Well, fear about the future of the country.
I see.
And he's telling people to carefully evaluate the information they're getting and not give in to panic.
Right, don't make decisions based on fear.
Exactly, and he says he and his family have no plans to leave Poland.
So he's putting his money where his mouth is.
Yeah, he's not just talking the talk.
That's reassuring.
It is, but he does foresee some challenges for Poland.
What kind of challenges?
Well, he specifically points to Law 447.
Law 447, what's that about?
It deals with the restitution of property that was nationalized after World War II.
Oh, wow. So like giving property back to the original owners.
Yeah, it's a really complex issue with potentially big consequences.
I can imagine.
And he doesn't think a lot of people in Poland fully understand the implications.
It sounds like something that could cause a lot of disruption.
Yeah, it could. And he also mentions Russia's actions in Ukraine and the possibility of a lot more Ukrainian refugees coming to Poland.
That would put a strain on resources.
It definitely would.
So a lot of potential for instability.
Yeah, and he also highlights another risk.
What's that?
The potential for unrest between Poles and Ukrainians.
Oh, wow. Like deliberately orchestrated unrest.
Yeah, that's what he's suggesting.
So people trying to create division and instability within Poland.
Exactly. And he thinks this could come from external forces.
So not just organic tension, but something more deliberate.
Yeah, that's his feeling.
That's really concerning.
It is.
So we've got potential economic fallout from this law. We've got the strain of refugees. And we've got the risk of manufactured social unrest.
Right. It's a lot for one country to deal with.
It's a lot for any country to deal with.
And then he also mentions the possibility of refugees coming from Western Europe.
From Western Europe.
Yeah, as part of relocation schemes.
Oh, wow.
And he thinks this could lead to more social disorder.
So even more pressure on Poland.
Yeah, it seems like he sees Poland as being in a very precarious position.
It's almost like they're surrounded.
Yeah, it kind of is. And he perceives this underlying international interest in creating chaos and division within Poland.
So like some countries want to see Poland weakened.
Yeah, that's what he seems to be implying.
It's a pretty bleak outlook.
It is, but he does say that he doesn't see a full-scale war erupting within Poland.
Okay, so at least there's that.
Yeah, but he does have a significant concern that Poland could be reduced in size.
Reduce in size, how do you mean?
Well, he doesn't specify that. It sounds like he's talking about losing territory.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and he sees this as a real danger.
So while he doesn't think Poland will completely disappear, he does think it could be significantly diminished.
Exactly.
It's a really nuanced prediction. He's acknowledging the potential for instability and these geopolitical pressures, but he's not saying that Poland is doomed.
Right, and I think the key point here is his focus on these external forces that are trying to create internal division.
Yeah, it's something to watch out for.
Definitely.
Okay, let's move on to something a little different, some more personal.
Okay.
Jackowski tells this story about a young boy.
Oh, yeah. This one is really something.
It's a really moving story, and it brings up some really big questions.
For sure.
So he talks about how he facilitated a phone call between a man and Robert Bernadovich.
Okay.
And this call involved a 7 or 8-year-old boy who told his mother that he remembered living before.
Oh, wow. Like a past life.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And he said that he had died young in that past life at the age of 7.
And he thought he would die young again.
Yeah, he had this really strong feeling that he would die young again in his current life.
That's heartbreaking.
It really is. And his parents were really concerned because he was so serious and convinced about it.
I can't even imagine what they must have been going through.
It must have been terrifying.
So what happened?
Well, they took him to a doctor.
Okay.
And after examining him, the doctor diagnosed him with bone cancer.
Oh, no.
It's a really tragic story.
Oh.
And Jackowski presents it as an example of what he calls determination.
Determination.
Yeah, or a preordained life path.
Oh, wow. So like destiny.
Yeah, kind of. And he draws a parallel to a previous prediction he made about a law student who had violent tendencies.
So he's suggesting that maybe some things are just meant to be.
It's a really thought-provoking idea that makes you question the whole concept of free will versus destiny.
It does, for sure.
And he contrasts this idea of a fixed fate with the impact that individuals can have on world events.
Okay.
So he uses the example of a failed assassination attempt on a historical figure,
Oh, wow.
and how a different outcome in that one event could have drastically changed the course of history.
Like a ripple effect.
Exactly.
And I think he's implying that the historical figure was Hitler.
It sounds like it.
So he's saying that even though there might be this element of destiny or predetermination,
Yeah.
individuals can still have a huge impact on how things unfold.
It's a really powerful message.
It is, and he brings it all back to our earlier conversation by talking about how the presence or absence of a key figure like Trump can significantly change the future.
Right, because one person's actions can have huge ripple effects.
Exactly, and he's suggesting that the danger he senses surrounding Trump could have consequences that go way beyond just Trump himself.
So it's not just about one man, it's about the potential impact on the whole world.
Right, and that's a really sobering thought.
It is.
So the takeaway here is that we need to be aware of this complex interplay between destiny, the choices we make, and the events that can shape our world.
Yeah, it's not a simple equation.
No, it's not.
And it leaves you wondering how much of what happens is inevitable and how much can be changed by even small actions.
It's a question worth pondering, for sure.
Definitely.
So in this deep dive, we've covered a lot of ground, haven't we?
We really have.
We started with ancient mysteries and possible connections to beings who were harmed by sunlight.
Yeah, the whole pyramid as technology thing is still blowing my mind.
It's a wild concept, for sure.
And then we moved into some pretty unsettling predictions about global turmoil.
And then Poland's uncertain future.
And then that really profound story about fate and the choices we make.
It's been a whirlwind.
It has, but it's also been incredibly thought-provoking.
I agree.
And I think what makes it so compelling is the unique perspective it offers on historical mysteries, current tensions, and these big questions about our existence.
Right. It encourages us to look for connections in places we might not have thought to look before.
Exactly.
So we definitely encourage you to keep thinking about these ideas and maybe even check out the original source material from Jackowski's YouTube channel.
Yeah, and maybe do some of your own research on some of the topics we discussed.
That's a great idea.
And as a final thought, I want you to consider this. How many seemingly unrelated events are happening in the world right now that might actually be interconnected in ways we don't yet fully understand?
That's a really good question.
It's something to keep in mind as you go about your day-to-day life, to look for those hidden connections.
It's a good reminder that there's always more to the story than meets the eye.
Absolutely.
So thanks for joining us on this deep dive, and we'll see you next time.
See that?